911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm at IV Dudley. I don't know what just happened.
Okay.
This is the American horror story, or the world's horror story, is when you have somebody who on the outside is one thing and on the inside is something completely different, and you don't see it.
You forced me to suffer all my life, and now I'll make you all suffer.
This video is not meant to memorialize the crimes perpetrated in this story. It's for educational purposes only. My aim is to shed light on the incel community, a disaffected group of young men, and their struggles. I'm going to do that through a story that is depressing, tragic, and violent, all centered around one delusional man. His story is important because for a lot of incels, not all, but many, he's considered to be a sort of spiritual leader in the incel community. He was himself an incel, a very tortured one, and he ended up writing an entire 137-page manifesto. And of course, I read the entire thing. It's probably one of the most depressing and darkest texts I've ever read. And by the end of reading it, I could feel it taking a toll on me. But for this video, as I go through his story, the first half of his life and the first half of the video is drawing a lot from that manifesto. And then as he got older, he started making a lot more video journals. And so for the second half of the video, we'll see a lot more of that. But who is this guy, the king of incels, as a lot of people call him? His name is Elliot Rodger.
Elliot Rodger. Elliot Rodger. Elliot Rodger here.
But his story starts long before these videos were ever made. And in his own words, it is a dark story of sadness, anger, and hatred. It is a story of war against cruel injustice. Elliot Oliver Robertson Rodger was born in England in 1991, and his childhood was great. It was full of fond memories of building snowmen, flying kites with his dad, and living in a beautiful house in the countryside of England. His parents soon had another child, his little sister Georgia. The memories I have of this period are only memories of happiness and bliss. When Elliot turned 5 years old, his dad's movie directing career started to take off, and so he took his young family to the place where all great movies are made. The family purchased a nice home in the neighborhood of Woodland Hills in the city of Los Angeles. And in kindergarten class, Elliot would make his first friend. The first friend I made in the United States was a girl. She was the first female friend I've ever had, and she would be the last. Together, they played endlessly in Serenia Park. Their families became close friends, but during this time, Elliot would begin to exhibit jealous behavior. For example, there was a boy in his kindergarten class named Joey, and these two did not get along. And at the end of the school year, when Elliot turned 6, his parents threw him an extravagant birthday party. Elliot invited every single classmate except for one. I deliberately omitted Joey as an act of revenge for being mean to me throughout the year, and I felt a sense of satisfaction in doing so. It was also around this time that Elliot started to notice that he was shorter than most kids his age. And there was one particular incident that stuck out to Elliot in his young mind and started laying a foundation for future thought patterns. I had just recently watched the movie Jurassic Park, and when I found out there was a Jurassic Park themed ride at the Universal Studios, I couldn't wait to go on it. We queued up in the line and waited for an hour. When we reached the front, the park staff presented me with a measuring stick, and I didn't fit the requirements. I saw other boys my age admitted onto the ride, but I was denied because I was too short. The ride that I was so excited to enjoy at the theme park was forbidden to me. I immediately fell into a crying tantrum, and my mother had to comfort me. It's not crazy to think that a 6-year-old that was denied a ride at a theme park would throw a tantrum. But Elliot and his mom started to develop a parasitic relationship that would last all the way into his adult years. Elliot would throw a tantrum and want something, and his mom would accommodate him, comfort him, and give him what he wanted. But for 6-year-old Elliot, life was pretty good for the most part. One thing did stick out to him though: the more his father's career took off, the less he saw of his dad. The only downside of this was my father's absence from my life. Despite this, I always looked up to him as a powerful and successful man. And Peter Rodger's career and the absence it caused also started to take a toll on his marriage. Shortly after Elliot's 7th birthday, his parents told him they would be getting a divorce. My life would change forever after this. The family I grew up with has split in half. And from then on, I would grow up in 2 different households. I remember crying. All the happy times I spent with my mother and father as a family were gone, only to remain in memory. Very quickly after the divorce, Peter Rodger started dating a movie star from Morocco. Her name was Sumaya Akaboun, and at first, her and Elliot got along well. When Elliot turned 9, his small stature and his physical weakness started to become a major insecurity for him. At this stage, I became extremely annoyed at how everyone was taller than me, and how the tallest boys were automatically respected more. Along with being short, I was physically weak compared to the other boys my age. Even boys younger than me were stronger. This vexed me to no end. And as his insecurities developed, his sense of jealousy also developed. By nature, I am a very jealous person, and at the age of 9, my jealous nature sprung to the surface. When he'd be playing with friends and they'd pay more attention to each other than him, he would start crying. When he played with his only female friend and she started to take more interest in his sister, same thing, he would start crying. And every time his mother would give in to his tantrums and try to accommodate him as best she could. Sumaya, though, Elliot's soon-to-be stepmom, refused to put up with this behavior. When she felt he was acting out of line, she would punish him. And as a result, Elliot started to resent her. And while all this was happening at home and things were becoming rocky for Elliot, he also started to struggle more at school. He started to notice things like cool kids, popularity, and cliques, and it took a toll on his mind. When I became aware of this common social structure at my school, I also started to examine myself and compare myself to these cool kids. I realized with some horror that I wasn't cool at all. And with that mindset, Elliot began his middle school years at Pinecrest Middle School, and all the social hierarchies he had experienced towards the end of his elementary school days only intensified in middle school. And the more Elliot struggled to fit in, the more he hated the people that he so badly wanted to be like. I thought all of the cool kids were obnoxious jerks, but I tried as best as I could to hide my disgust and appear cool to them. They were obnoxious jerks, and yet somehow it was these boys all the girls flocked to. This showed me that the world was a brutal place, and human beings were nothing more than savage animals. Everything my father taught me was proven wrong. He raised me to be a polite, kind gentleman. In a decent world, that would be ideal, but the polite, kind gentleman doesn't win in the real world. The girls don't flock to the gentleman, they flock to the alpha male. They flock to the boys who appear to have the most power and status, and it was a ruthless struggle to reach such a height. On a quick side note, these feelings of inferiority that Elliot is expressing when he compares himself to these other boys, it's extremely commonplace in the incel community. Incels stands for involuntary celibates, and they are just people that have tried to have romantic relationships, but for whatever reason are struggling to do so. The deeper I've gotten into these communities, because they have lots of online forums, the more slang terms you start to pick up. And there's actually a slang term that perfectly describes the boys that Elliot was ranting about. These boys that are jockish and boisterous and that seem to attract all the girls with their loud personalities. Males like this are known as Chad, and according to incels, they are the 1% of men that get the majority of attractive women. Take this post right here. It's titled Day in the Life of Chad. We see this Chad going around a club getting positive interactions with all these girls, and the responses from other incels in this thread are pretty telling. A life like this is just foreign to me. I can't imagine receiving such positive reactions from women. Envy is rising inside of me again. I'll want to kick his ass. It comes down to this belief, and this is perfectly worded by a user in an incel chat room that I found. He says, Chads don't need to approach women, the women come to them. And so, surrounded by Chads, combined with his jealousy, Elliot struggled because of his lack of attention from women. It almost seemed like the only kind of attention he could get from women was the bad kind. He describes an experience he had in middle school. I accidentally bumped into a pretty girl the same age as me, and she got very angry. She cursed at me and pushed me, embarrassing me in front of my friends. I didn't know who this girl was. She was only at Pinecrest for summer camp, but she was very pretty and she was taller than me. I immediately froze up and went into a state of shock. One of my friends asked me if I was okay and I didn't answer. I remained very quiet for the rest of the day. I couldn't believe what had happened. Cruel treatment from women is 10 times worse than from men. It made me feel like an insignificant, unworthy little mouse. I felt so small and vulnerable. I couldn't believe that this girl was so horrible to me, and I thought that it was because she viewed me as a loser. That was the first experience of female cruelty I endured, and it traumatized me to no end. It made me even more nervous around girls, and I would be extremely wary, cautious of them from that point on. And so in 7th grade, as all this was taking place, Elliot began to turn to video games to escape the pain that he was experiencing both at home and at school. His game of choice was World of Warcraft. He got so addicted so quickly that he stopped socializing with his friends. It was the beginning of a very lonely period of my life in which my only social interactions would be through online video games. And as a result of his lack of socializing, Elliot struggled even more to fit in at school. As middle school approached its ultimate end, I was having a miserable time there. I was extremely unpopular, widely disliked, and viewed as the weirdest kid in school. And on the flip side, at home, he wasn't being challenged. His father was away on business most of the time. He was being raised by nannies. And his mom just wanted to make sure he was happy and accommodated. So the only person that would try to stop him from gaming endlessly was his stepmom, Sumaya. And as a result, the rift between them just got deeper. But despite her trying to limit his time, he still ended up gaming most of that summer away between his 8th and 9th grade years. And then suddenly, before he knew it, that dreaded first day of high school was upon him. And socially awkward Elliot, shy and already terrified of women, begged his parents to let him go to an all-boys school. And they did. My father drove me there on the first day. When we got there, I was intimidated by all the huge high school boys, and I cried in the car for a few minutes, telling my father that I was too scared to get out. Eventually, though, he went inside, and starting from day one, due to his awkward nature and his shyness, he became a prime target for bullying. Upperclassmen would throw food at him in the lunchroom. They teased me because I was scared of girls, calling me names like People also liked to steal my belongings and run away in an attempt to get me to chase after them. And I did chase after them in a furious rage. But I was so little and weak that they thought it was comical. I hated everyone at that school so much. His time there was so miserable that he begged his parents to transfer him. And just trying to be good parents, once again, they did what he wanted. He transferred to Taft High School, but unfortunately his experience there was even worse. One boy who was tall and had blonde hair called me a loser right in front of his girlfriends. Yes, he had girls with him, pretty girls, and they didn't seem to mind that he was such an evil bastard. In fact, I bet they liked him for it. This is how girls are, and I was starting to realize it. This was what truly opened my eyes to how brutal the world is. The most meanest and depraved of men come out on top, and women flock to these men. Their evil acts are rewarded by women, while the good, decent men are laughed at. It's sick, twisted, and wrong in every way. I hated the girls even more than the bullies because of this. The sheer cruelty of the world around me was so intense that I will never recover from the mental scars. Any experience I had ever had before never traumatized me as much as this. But if Elliot thought he was miserable at Taft, he had no idea what was coming. Now, up to this point, Elliot had always been hyper-focused and hyper-aware of what makes someone popular. In elementary school, he tried skateboarding, hacky-sacking, and even dyed his hair bleach blonde to try to fit in with the cool kids. In middle school, the focuses kind of changed. He could sense that the way you get status is by how many girls like you. And so he became hyper-focused on that. But his obsession with getting attention from girls was about to intensify. And the change that caused this happened in his body. Puberty struck Elliot hard, and he began to explore his sexuality. He was exposed to pornography around this time, and he started to develop an obsession with beautiful, tall, blonde girls. And Elliot's jealous tendencies that had never really been checked or addressed started to become pretty rampant. All his obsession and fascinations were dialed into one thing now: beautiful girls. And true to form, he began to envy anyone around him that was having any sort of experience with beautiful women. One incident took place with family friends of the Rodgers who had a son named Leo. Now keep in mind, Leo's only 12 years old and Elliot was 16 when this happened. The families were eating together at a party and Leo sat next to a girl, leading to this moment. Leo was making out with a girl who was almost my age. Not only does Leo have a better social life, but now he was making out with girls at age 12. They made out for a long time and I could see them tongue kiss. They knew I was watching with envy and they still did it. I bet that lucky bastard took great satisfaction from my envy. There I was, watching a boy 4 years younger than me experience everything I've longed for: to kiss a girl, to be worthy of a girl's attraction. On that day, I developed a vicious hatred for Leo that will never go away. Another incident occurred on a separate night, but with the same family. This time it involved their daughter, Paulina. We were having dinner at their house, like we usually did. At the end of the dinner, a few of Paulina's friends came over. They were all popular, good-looking girls and boys. They were the kind of people who I've always had the desire to be a part of, but was never able to fit in with. Popular kids, cool kids. When I heard them talking about their awesome lives and their parties, I had a breakdown right then and there. I realized how much I've been missing out in my life and I cried in front of everyone. I felt like I would never have a life as good as theirs. Imagine the shame and embarrassment of crying in front of the very people that you want so badly, but you've told yourself and convinced yourself that you could never have. Because in every situation, Elliot had already told himself that these people were beyond his reach. He said things like they would never give me a chance if I talked to them, yet he never actually spoke with them. And because of thought patterns like this, he denied himself of having any chance at having a fulfilling social life. You remember how he just transferred to Taft High School? That only lasted 2 weeks before he begged his parents to transfer him again. And again, they agreed. But this time it was going to be a hybrid homeschool program where he would go spend a few hours at school and then the rest of the day at home. All that did for Elliot, though, was give him huge amounts of time to be alone and constantly in pain from scanning the world and viewing all the injustices of other girls being with guys. Elliot turned back to World of Warcraft to try to numb that. The only way I could deal with it was to continue to drown all of my troubles with my online games. I played WoW really hard, leveling 2 new characters to 70. At Mother's house, I sometimes played it for 14 hours a day. His new homeschool schedule also afforded him tons of time to think. But when Elliot Rodger has time to think, his mind always goes to the same place: He constantly stews in jealousy and rage, thinking about all the young people out there enjoying the life that he thinks he can never have. And so during this time, he also began to form very unhealthy philosophies. I felt that no girl would ever want to have sex with me, and I developed extreme feelings of envy, hatred, and anger towards anyone who has a sex life. I saw them as the enemy. I felt condemned to live a life of lonely celibacy while other boys were allowed to experience the pleasures of sex, all because girls didn't want me. I felt inferior and undesirable. This time, however, I couldn't just stand by and accept such an injustice anymore. I refused to continue hiding away from the world and forgetting about all the insults it dealt to me. I began to have fantasies of becoming very powerful and stopping everyone from having. I wanted to take it away from them, just like they took it away from me. I saw it as an evil and barbaric act, all because I was unable to have it. This was the major turning point. My anger made me stronger inside. This is when I formed my ideas that should be outlawed. It is the only way to make the world a fair and just place. If I can't have it, I will destroy it. That's the conclusion I came to right then and there. In addition to this, he also began to develop a sense of superiority. It was most likely a way to cope with feelings of jealousy about people that he viewed as more socially savvy than himself. I have an exceptionally high level of intelligence. I see the world differently than anyone else. Because of all the injustices I went through and the worldview I developed because of them, I must be destined for greatness. I must be destined to change the world, to shape it into an image that suits me. He also began to form an ideology in his mind that to this day is still discussed in incel forums. His ideas, which are found on one of the final pages of his manuscript, are pretty terrifying. They're wild and they're depraved, but here it is. I have created the ultimate and perfect ideology of how a fair and pure world would work. In an ideal world, sexuality would not exist. It must be outlawed. In a world without humanity will be pure and civilized. Men will grow up healthily without having to worry about such a barbaric act. All men will grow up fair and equal because no man will be able to experience the pleasures while others are denied it. The human race will evolve to an entirely new level of civilization, completely devoid of all the impurity and degeneracy that exists today. In order to completely abolish, women themselves would have to be abolished. All women must be quarantined like the plague they are, so that they can be used in a manner that actually benefits a civilized society. In order to carry this out, there must exist a new and powerful type of government under the control of one divine ruler, such as myself. The ruler that establishes this new order would have complete control over every aspect of society in order to direct it towards a good and pure place. At the disposal of this government, there needs to be a highly trained army of fanatically loyal troops in order to enforce such revolutionary laws. The first strike against women will be to quarantine all of them in concentration camps. At these camps, the vast majority of the female population will be deliberately starved to death. That would be an efficient and fitting way to kill them all off. I would take great pleasure and satisfaction in condemning every single woman on earth to starve to death. I would have an enormous tower built just for myself where I can oversee the entire concentration camp and gleefully watch them all die. If I can't have them, no one will. I'd imagine thinking to myself as I oversee this. Women represent everything that is unfair with this world, and in order to make the world a fair place, they must all be eradicated. A few women would be spared, however, for the sake of reproduction. These women would be kept and bred in secret labs. There, they will be artificially inseminated with sperm samples in order to produce offspring. Their depraved nature will slowly be bred out of them in time. Future generations of men would be oblivious to these remaining women's existence, and that is for the best. If a man grows up without knowing of the existence of women, there will be no desire for sexuality will completely cease to exist. Love will cease to exist. There will no longer be any imprint of such concepts in the human psyche. It is the only way to purify the world. In such a pure world, the man's mind can develop to greater heights than ever before. Future generations will live their lives free of having to worry about the barbarity of sex in women, which will enable them to expand their intelligence and advance the human race to a state of perfect civilization. Very disturbing, very dark. But as I mentioned before, the truly scary thing is there are still people talking about this ideology today. These are just a few posts I've gathered from a popular incel forum, and it's not even like I had to dive that deep. It was literally within minutes that I found this. Rodgerism is a religion established by the incel prophet Elliot Rodger, who was sent by God to this earth from the heavens to spread the black pill philosophy and awaken the world to the truth behind female nature and human nature in general. And this response right here, "Hail, the more I live, the more his ideas make sense." Or this post right here titled, "Marxism, Rodgerism, How Will the Distribution of Females Work in Inceldom?" In this post, the distribution of virgin wives is discussed and a conversation takes place through the threads discussing how to deal with the fallout from taking daughters from their fathers to distribute to the incel community. The conversation is so depraved that even a veteran member of this incel forum with over 8,000 posts under his belt posted this. These threads are becoming a bit scary, man. But these forums have millions of posts, and one could go down the deepest and darkest of rabbit holes before you hardly even scratch the surface. So let's get back to Elliot, because right now the stage is set for something truly awful to happen. Here are just a few of the ingredients that are going into the stew that is Elliot's brain. Semi-absent parents, a huge sense of entitlement from being raised in wealth, given whatever he wants, also reinforcing his entitlement. Never worked a single job, therefore never challenged to grow socially in an uncomfortable environment. Extreme social anxiety and shyness, again, never challenged because he's homeschooled. Extreme obsession with girls and extreme jealousy and hatred of men that have what he doesn't. And worst of all, violent new ideas that are just starting to grow regarding women and the men that attract them. At this point, he was 18 years old and definitely not what we would consider a well-adjusted adult. Just after turning 18, he had an explosive incident with Sumaya, his stepmom, and after a heated argument, he was no longer welcome at his father's house. But despite that, things weren't all bad. He moved in with his mom and he enrolled in a class at Moore Park Community College. Elliot saw this new start as perhaps an opportunity to escape his past life of virginity and being an incel. And so with hope in his heart, he went to his first class. But unfortunately, the jealousies that plagued his mind would follow him to college as well. There was this one obnoxious jock with a buzz cut who was taking the class with his gorgeous girlfriend. They always sat next to each other, talking and touching each other with affection. Every day I had to see this and my envy grew and grew. I constantly glared at them with raw hatred. What did I do wrong that he did right? I yelled out to the universe on the way home. Why does he deserve the love of a beautiful girl and not me? Why do girls hate me so? After a few days of seeing this couple, he literally could not handle it. That guy was able to experience his college life with his beautiful girlfriend by his side while I was all alone. It made me feel so inferior. I had to watch them together every single day. The torture was unbearable. When I got home from college one day, I dropped my class in a rage. His mom was not okay with him being at home doing nothing, and so she said he either needs to go back to college or get a job. So he ended up getting a job as a custodian, and on his first day, within the first 2 hours of his shift, he quit, saying that a custodial job was beneath him. And so without any other options, he went back to Moore Park Community College and enrolled in another class. But walking the campus every day and seeing couples was torture for him. The only thing I could do was keep my head down and pretend they didn't exist. I still cried on the drive home every day. College was turning out to be a very lonely experience. But Elliot did have one friend though. His name was James, and James was a longtime childhood friend that Elliot met in elementary school, and the two of them had been playing World of Warcraft together for years. But one night, that friendship would end when Elliot and him met up after not having seen each other for a long time. While walking around a mall together that they used to go to when they were younger, Elliot became so enraged by the sight of some teenagers hanging out that he began to rant violently. I told him about all the torturous acts of revenge I would carry out against all those who have insulted me or lived a better life than me. I thought that James would relate to me since he was also a virgin who had no girls in his life, but some of the things I said began to disturb him. One night, he told me with a lot of distress that enough was enough. Elliot was so obsessed, so jealous, that he couldn't stop himself from severing the last relationship he had outside of his family. And his parents, sensing that Elliot was going down a bad path, decided to try one last plan of action. They informed Elliot that he would be moving to Isla Vista in Santa Barbara to attend SBCC, but that college town that was so full of life had no idea what Elliot had in store for them. Now, this is where it gets interesting because up to this point, I've just been referencing his manifesto. But upon moving to Isla Vista, Elliot started making videos and becoming very active on incel forums, which allows us to get an even clearer view into his mind.
Young couples walking around. It makes me so envious.
But one thing became apparent very quickly, and that is that no matter what, Elliot cannot seem to escape the patterns of his past. Within his first week, his new housemates had a friend over, and as they were all having a conversation, this friend, who happens to be black, mentioned to Elliot that he had lost his virginity to a blonde girl. I was so enraged that I almost splashed him with my orange juice. I indignantly told him that I did not believe him, and then I went to my room to cry. I cried and cried and cried, and then I called my mother and cried to her on the phone. How could an inferior, ugly black boy be able to get a white girl and not me? I am beautiful and I am half white myself. I am descended from British aristocracy. He is descended from slaves. I deserve it more. I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said, and it was hard to erase from my mind. If this is actually true, if this ugly black filth was able to have with a blonde white girl at the age of 13 while I've had to suffer virginity all my life, then this just proves how ridiculous the female gender is. They would give themselves to this filthy scum, but they reject me? The injustice. The irony here is that even though Elliot is 50% Asian himself, he's 100% racist.
I mean, the other day, I was doing some grocery shopping at Trader Joe's. And I was, of course, all alone, as I always am. Which makes me feel so miserable. Anyway, I was doing my shopping and I see this like, disgusting looking loser. Well, he's a loser in my opinion. And he walks in with these two beautiful blonde girls at his side. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was so insulted by that because I should be the one with the girls.
Look at this post he made on a forum in response to a picture of some nice tennis shoes. Shoes won't help you get white girls. White girls are disgusted by you, you silly little Asian. Or this one where Elliot responds to a picture of an Asian man with a pretty blonde girl saying, "What? What? Are you telling me that an Asian boy snagged this blonde beauty while I'm struggling as an incel? No way. If this is true, I'm going to burst with rage." In a lot of incel forums, you can see incels commiserating with each other, oftentimes offering support to one another. But it's posts like this that show that Elliot Rodger truly had no regard for anyone but himself. Here he was attacking two people for being Asian when he himself had Asian roots. It was an absolutely dangerous combination of narcissism, jealousy, rage, and entitlement. And the longer he spent in Isla Vista, the more disdain he had for the people around him. Females truly have something mentally wrong with them. Their minds are flawed, and at this point in my life I was beginning to see it. The more I explored my college town of Isla Vista, the more ridiculousness I witnessed. All of the hot, beautiful girls walked around with obnoxious, tough, jock-type men who partied all the time and acted crazy. They should be going for intelligent gentlemen such as myself. And down the rabbit hole he went, spending massive amounts of time alone and nurturing his hatred for the people of Isla Vista.
As I walk around like the common areas of those towns, or the areas where all the college parties happen, I see these obnoxious guys walking with beautiful girls. And that pisses me off because I should be the one with the girls. I mean, look at me. I'm gorgeous. I was enjoying such a nice view until they came and sat down and started kissing. This is the reason why life isn't fair. Why does that guy get to have such a beautiful girlfriend while I'm all alone? They're kissing right now. It's torture for me to watch, but I have to do this. I have to film this. I have to show the world why life isn't fair.
Elliot quickly dropped out of all of his classes there as well, not able to handle the sight of young couples hanging out on campus, or even just guys talking to girls in college classes. And with the financial support of both his mom and his dad, he now had even more time and plenty of resources to nurture that compulsive jealousy even further.
I see so many couples where the guy is just so unworthy of having a beautiful girlfriend like that, and yet they're together. He has her love. And I've never had any of that love and affection from girls. Why do you girls give those guys a chance, but not me? I deserve it more. It's not fair. Those beautiful blonde girls should be walking with me. Not those brutes. I deserve them more.
As he wallowed in despair, he began to fantasize about violent acts, revenge against the people that he felt looked down on him. And in an effort to make himself feel better, and potentially still attract a girl, he would go on frivolous shopping sprees, dropping tons of money on nice clothes and things. But what he never understood is why that didn't change his standing with women.
You know, I put a lot of effort into dressing nice.
And then real warning signs started happening when he no longer just thought about this stuff and kept it to himself. He actually started lashing out at people. I went to the Starbucks at the Camino Real marketplace by myself, like I usually did every morning. I ordered my coffee and sat down on one of their chairs to relax. A few moments later, when I looked up from my drink, I saw a young couple standing in line. The two of them were kissing passionately. The boy looked like an obnoxious punk. He was tall and wore baggy pants. The girl was a pretty blonde. They looked like they were in the throes of passionate sexual attraction to each other, rubbing their bodies together and tongue kissing in front of everyone. I was absolutely livid with envious hatred. When they left the store, I followed them to their car and splashed my coffee all over them. The boy yelled at me and I quickly ran away in fear. I was panicking as I got into my car and drove off, shaking with rage-fueled excitement. I had never struck back at my enemies before, and I felt a small sense of spiteful gratification for doing so. I hated them so much. Even though I splashed them with my coffee, he was still the winner. He was going home to have passionate, heavenly sex with his beautiful girlfriend, and I was going home to my lonely room to sleep alone in my lonely bed. In this video here, he calls someone an a-hole just for walking next to a girl.
You're an asshole.
There were several other things he did as well, and with each act he became a little more bold. I wanted to inflict pain on all young couples. It was around this point in my life that I realized I was capable of doing such things. I would happily do such things. I was capable of killing them, and I wanted to. I wanted to kill them slowly, to strip the skins off their flesh. They deserve it. The males deserve it for taking the females away from me, and the females deserve it for choosing those males instead of me. And so he finally began taking real steps towards revenge. He purchased 3 handguns and a huge cache of ammunition. He also started planning when and how he would execute an act of violence on the people he hated so much, even going as far as to name the act. I named it the Day of Retribution. It would be a day in which I exact my ultimate retribution and revenge on all the hedonistic scum who enjoyed lives of pleasure that they don't deserve. If I can't have it, I will destroy it.
All these people think they're better than me. I'll show them.
Initially, the Day of Retribution was supposed to take place in November of 2013, but Elliot decided to give Isla Vista one last chance of redemption. His plan was to go out one last time and see if he could get with a girl. I resolved that if I go out to Isla Vista for this final time and I still end up going back to my room as a lonely virgin, I will have no choice but to plan my retribution. I was giving the female gender one last chance to provide me with the pleasures I deserved from them. The night ended in disaster. Elliot ended up getting extremely drunk so that he could be a little more bold. And while he was sitting next to some girls on a 10-foot ledge, he let his rage take over. He started trying to push these girls down, and of course some guys got involved and ended up pushing Elliot down instead. His leg snapped from the 10-foot fall, and as he hobbled away in pain, he suddenly looked down and realized that his $300 sunglasses were missing. So he hobbled back to try to get them, but being so drunk, he went to the wrong house, started a fight with those guys, and ended up getting the crap beat out of him. He mentions all that briefly in this video.
And look, that's the house I got beat up at when I walked in on the party.
But he fails, of course, to mention that he was the aggressor. It didn't matter. Isla Vista had failed Elliot Rodger. It had failed to make things right and fair. But one good thing did come from this night, and that was that Elliot now needed time to recover from his injuries, and he ended up having to push the Day of Retribution off for another few months. That New Year's, he spent the night alone at his mom's house. They were all out at another party, and he drank wine in her backyard, lamenting. His videos also became more frequent, and the content matter in each of them was basically the same.
I'm such a magnificent guy. I'm beautiful. Yet you girls don't see it. Here I am, Elliot Rodger. Beautiful, magnificent gentleman. Though the girls around this town don't see it. That's why my life is so unfair.
Everything almost came to a halt when Elliot's mom saw some of the videos he had been posting. She immediately alerted a mental health agency, who then had the police go out to conduct a welfare check on Elliot. He woke up to 7 officers knocking on his door, but he was able to convince them that he was harmless. I tactfully told them that it was all a misunderstanding, and they finally left. If they had demanded to search my room, that would have ended everything. He subsequently took the videos from YouTube down for a brief period, prompting this user on a forum to post this. "I see you got rid of those serial killer-esque videos on YouTube." To which Elliot replies, "My parents discovered the videos, so I temporarily took them down. They will be back up in a few days, along with more videos I've filmed." Now, if you notice the date right here, this post was made on May 18th, a Sunday evening. Only 5 short days later, Elliot would finally strike. His final act on this earth was detailed in his manifesto. I'm going to dumb it down a little bit because it's extremely graphic and disturbing, but even my vanilla version is still just crazy. The Day of Retribution would take part in 3 phases. Phase 1 involved murdering his roommates to have access to his whole apartment. and then luring attractive people there where he would torture and murder them in macabre ways. Phase 2 would be his revenge on women.
On the day of retribution, I am going to enter the hottest sorority house of UCSB, and I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde I see inside there.
After doing that, he planned on burning down the entire house before commencing his final phase. Phase 3 would involve him murdering his stepmom and his half-brother. His stepmom because he hated her, and his little brother who he loved, though he feared would one day surpass Elliot socially. He would then steal his dad's car, it being a much bigger SUV than the car he had, and he would drive it back to Isla Vista, where people tend to walk on the streets, and there he would hit as many people as he possibly could with his car until he saw police officers approaching, at which point he would take his own life. The attack started with his 2 roommates, as well as a 3rd victim that just happened to be visiting them at the time. After that, Elliot went to Starbucks to get a coffee, before uploading his Day of Retribution video, where he detailed his plan.
Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the Day of Retribution, the day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. You girls have never been attracted to me. I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me. I will punish all of you for it. If I had it in my power, I would stop at nothing to reduce every single one of you to mountains of skulls and rivers of blood. I hate you. I hate all of you. I can't wait to give you exactly what you deserve. Utter annihilation.
1 minute later, he sent a copy of his manifesto to several people, including his psychiatrist, his mom, and his dad. His psychiatrist was the first person to read it, and he immediately called Elliot's mom.
Minutes ago, I finally checked my email. I saw this letter. It's from Elliot Rodger, who's a Santa Barbara City College student. It's 141 pages. So when you get to the end, which is where I went to immediately, page 134, it's a very detailed attack they plan on taking in Isla Vista.
I will be a god compared to you. You will all be animals, and I will slaughter you like animals.
But at this point, it was too late. Elliot had already pulled up to the sorority house, but after banging on the door for a while, no one answered. He got back into his car and began a murderous rampage. And while this was happening, his parents were trying to rush to Santa Barbara as quickly as they could, but they were already hearing reports coming in over the radio.
I was hearing, reports of a black BMW, and I was going, oh, no, no, no. And we were on the phone at the same time to the police, and they were saying, we don't have any information for you, no information.
I don't really want to go into details of the attack because this isn't meant to be a true crime video, but ultimately by the end of the night, Elliot had killed 6 people and injured 14 others before taking his own life. The events of that day will haunt that town forever. You cannot say Isla Vista without thinking of Elliot Rodger. And in many parts of the incel forums, Elliot is hailed as a hero. His initials, ER, have even become slang to mean mass murder. Even as recently as today, as I'm filming this, I found people talking about Elliot Rodger in chat rooms on this forum. I know not all incels like Elliot. A lot of them reject Elliot. This post says, I can't understand some incels' love for Elliot. He was a spoiled rich kid who never worked a single day in his life, and although his incel problems are all very relatable to us, he killed people who never did anything bad to him instead of killing the ones who really hurt him. And worse, he served as a convenient example for the media to vilify us when we are in fact the victims. But for every post like this, there are always multiple responses in defense of Elliot Rodger. I don't care for the fact he is rich, but he fought against society, which is so much infinity better than what 99% of the cowardly f***its are doing here on this forum. And this one that says, he was a martyr to this cause, we can't deny it, at least he's now rotting in peace. As well as this one, his manifesto is the foundation of the modern incel movement. The other day I actually had the pleasure to interview a self-proclaimed incel who I met on an incel community on Facebook. He's a really nice guy named Amer who lives in Pakistan, and it's his belief that society cannot continue to ignore incels. He's not saying that threateningly, but rather he's trying to shed light on the fact that this is a hurting and marginalized group of boys who lack guidance and lack meaning and purpose in life. And people that reach a certain point who are no longer afraid to die because of how miserable they are dangerous. So I asked what we should do to help. And his advice was amazing. He said, we need to stop normalizing making fun of people that lack romantic relationships.
So like if someone has a lack of food, I don't mock them for it. If someone has a lack of good health, I don't mock them for it. But if someone has a lack of sexual attraction, we just normalize the idea of mocking each other.
In addition to this, Elliot Rodger's former roommate had this to say.
It might be easy to write Elliot off as, twisted, or, he was always going to do this. But I think that for situations like this, it's a community's responsibility to help these people before something like this happens.
And another former roommate also said this.
I think he's a really lonely guy. I mean, if he had received more love, then I don't think it will get that bad.
Loving the incel community is unpopular. It seems counterintuitive. It's a community that's easy to dismiss and laugh at. We typically think of stinky gamer boys that live in their mom's basements. And often, and I've seen this firsthand being in their communities and forums, they have extreme views and bitter personalities and can just be generally off-putting. But me and Amer, we both agree that these are people that need help. I want to say clearly that I condemn anyone that performs violent acts against humanity, such as Elliot, especially Elliot. I think the kid was conceited and unbearable and just someone with a total lack of regard for anyone but himself. The reasoning behind his actions, why he did what he did, as twisted as they are still sentiments that are shared by a huge number of young men that are out there hurting and feeling helpless and feeling like they have no path other than violence or misery.
It's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults, these incels. What does it mean? It's like, well, these men, they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women who are very picky, and good for them. Women, be picky. That's your gift, man. Demand high standards from your men. Fair enough. But all these men who are alienated, it's like they're lonesome and they don't know what to do, and everyone piles abuse on them. It's really something to see constantly how many people are dying for lack of an encouraging word. And how easy it is to provide that if you're careful. Give credit where credit is due. And to say, you're a net force for good if you want to be.
That's really all we can do, is try to be a net force for good. Because the world is only getting crazier from here as people descend further into social media echo chambers, where their thoughts are just bounced back and forth between like-minded people and themselves. A few weeks back, I actually interviewed a guy who himself nearly became a school shooter. He went so deep down the wrong rabbit holes that he almost did something that he could never come back from. The video's right here. Please watch it. It's an incredible story, and it has a way more hopeful outcome than what we saw with Elliot. And thanks for being here, and Godspeed.